We're joined at the library desk by our boss, Susan Goldberg, President and CEO of GBH. Susan, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for coming in, Susan.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thanks, Jim.
So people may know that some members of the GOP have been gunning for PBS and NPR for a long time. The House just passed a bill that would cut off funding. I think it was 214 to 212, and now the bill is in the Senate. So what's going on in the Senate, and are our prospects any better there?
Well, I think they are a little bit better there. So this was last week, and the House did pass by that very slim margin this rescission package put forward by the president, by President Trump's administration, and it would claw back $1.1 billion worth of funding that was already allocated for Congress to fund public media in fiscal years 26 and 27. Fiscal year 26 begins in October, so it's not a long time from now. So it did pass by that narrow margin. I thought for a minute there that it was going to go down, but it passed. So now it goes to the Senate, and because this is on a time clock of just 45 days, so they've got until, I believe it is July 18th, where they have to either pass this through or the money, or it loses and we stay. I do think we have a better chance in the Senate. And the real conversation is, what gets hurt by the loss of public media, right? What stations all over the country in news deserts will absolutely disappear? What emergency services disappear? What content, especially for kids, and we make a bunch of it, will completely disappear? So that's going to be the conversation you're going to be hearing between now and at latest July 18th.
Can we bifurcate that? We had Ken Burns on at 11:30 to celebrate Bunker Hill Day, and after he said, "You'll love this," he said he almost stuttered when he said, "Frontline is the greatest program ever," is what he said. But he went on to say, he wasn't saying that the elimination of funding would not be horrible for us. You'll tell us in a minute. But particularly where you seem to be going, a lot of the smaller stations, many of which are in red states, which are 100% reliant on their local PBS or NPR station, they disappear if this money disappears, correct?
Some of them would disappear. For example, I was just reading this morning that the station in Erie, Pennsylvania gets 50% of all of its budget from the federal government. Now, that's a very different situation from what we have at GBH, where that number is 8%.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a little bit of a complicated situation because we get money from PBS to make all of these programs, but if you're a station and you're getting half of your money from the federal government, and it is a lot of these small stations in news deserts, many of them in red states, this is an existential crisis.
So what does it mean? I obviously don't want to suggest, nor do you, that it doesn't have meaning for us. As I'm sure people who listen to the show or consume the media know, there was a roughly 4% cut in staff a year ago because of budgetary concerns here, another 6 several weeks ago. This is obviously pre any kind of rescission of federal funding. What would this mean for us should Congress the Senate do the wrong thing?
Well, if the Senate does pass this package, I think that we're going to have to look at our programming just across everything that we do. It's our national programs definitely could be affected, and it's everything from American Experience and Frontline, Nova, Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow. All of those shows could be affected in one way or another. I'm not saying we're going to not make them, but we might have to make some fewer of them, for example. But already our money for kids programming has been affected when he canceled the grants that we got from the Department of Education to create children's television. This is educational children's television. So much money is spent on the research. How do you teach kids to read in a way that's fun? How do you teach them to do math? That money's already gone, and some of our unfortunate layoffs were due to the elimination of that money.
And we should make clear, as you did in passing a minute ago, is not only are those shows of huge value to this community, GBH is responsible for somewhere in the neighborhood of 40%? What's the number of television that's put on the air at PBS stations around the country?
We're the largest producer of content
in the country
for PBS. So we are proudly local. We are proudly Boston and proudly actually all across the Commonwealth in our reach. But we are all over the country, and in fact, with some shows like Frontline, those air globally as well.
We're talking to Susan Goldberg, President and CEO of GBH.
You know, I think one of the Republican senators that may help is Lisa Murkowski. And I heard legislators talking over the weekend up in Alaska about the fact that there are very far-flung areas of Alaska that their NPR station is it.
She has talked a lot about that, and I don't know if you remember the hearing in front of Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Oh, we do.
The Doge hearing. Well, the president of the local PBS station in Alaska was on there talking about the significant impact in a lot of those far-flung and remote communities that just will not have access to news, to emergency services, to really programming of any kind.
Here's a note you'd find interesting. Jamie leads our show. My son, 5 years old, was watching PBS Kids programming over the weekend, and he started crying, worried he'd lose wild krats and wombats. I promised him I'd do what I can to keep his favorite shows on. I bet you there are a lot of little kids whose parents are talking about this who are going through what Jamie's kid is doing.
You know, thank you for that. And as you know, we make Work It Out Wombats. This is a show that teaches kids. It teaches kids about computational thinking, breaking down problems, solving things one step at a time. I mean, I wish every adult would watch Work It Out Wombats. We'd probably live in a saner community. But you've got to think, how are we going to be able to create those shows when all of the money that does the research to help us create those shows has just gone away?
So Jill Abramson used to have a pretty big job. She used to run the New York Times as the lead editor. You know her. I know.
do.
You've known her for a long time. She writes a piece in the Globe the other day, and I'll summarize it, and you'll tell me if you think it's unfair. She said, in normal times, one can make an argument for the fact that even though we're one of 4 cities in the country that has 2 NPR stations, maybe they should merge. But the argument is even stronger, she would advance, when funding for both BUR and both GBH are at risk. For those who don't know, you have a long relationship with Margaret Lowe, who runs BUR. What's your reaction to what Jill had to say? And 2, have there ever been conversations between BUR and us about some sort of merger?
Well, I will tell you that from the moment I got to Boston 2.5 years ago, what I have heard most consistently, other than comments about our programming, is, why don't you merge with BUR, right? It is a real refrain. And, you know, I think that, I wish Jill would have called me for that story, because as you say, Jim, I have known her for, I don't know, probably about 25 years. And what I would have told her is that I think that we are living in such a disruptive time that we need to talk about all different kinds of ways to move forward. Look, Margaret and I talk all the time. I have great admiration for a lot of the
Margaret
work.
Lowe, BUR.
Margaret, the head of BUR. You know, I have a lot of admiration for the work that they do. But I don't think people also realize how different we are from BUR. You know, we are both NPR stations, but we are also, as we just talked about, PBS. We've got a whole children's arm. We've got a whole education arm. We do all of this stuff all over the country. We own 2 other radio stations, WCAI at the Cape, NEPM in Western Massachusetts. We have a classical station as well. So we're about 4 times larger than they are, and we do a lot of different things. So in many ways we're complementary, but in many ways we just do different
But
work.
you're not saying, I mean, I listened carefully, you're not saying no. You're saying
I'm
everything's
saying that,
on the table.
Look,
Is that a fair statement?
I think it's fair to say that at a time when there is a real threat to federal funding for public media, you should be open-minded about how you operate.
Okay, so you say the most common question you get is that. The most common question we get from people in Massachusetts, we have tons of listeners, you know, beyond our borders, but from people in Massachusetts, all of the members of the delegation are for us. We mentioned you, we were speaking to Senator Markey the other night, Marjorie and I. He couldn't be working harder to try to keep this thing alive. I know you're dealing with him too. What do you say to somebody who's in a pro-CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting state? What do? How do they help keep this whole program alive?
Well, I think what's really important is people should go to Protect My Public Media, which is a website. Literally millions of people have gone to Protect My Public Media.
What?
And what?
What? We'll check it out.
I think if you just type
it in. Okay, fine.
Protect My Public Media, you'll get to the
okay.
right place. But millions of people have reached out to Congress to express their thoughts, and I think that really does make a huge difference, because it really matters to a lot of people, and it costs Americans all of $1.60 a year.
So you're never nervous publicly, which is our interaction with you. Are you nervous inside about this?
I'm not happy about this.
Okay.
I mean, this I do think it is the in 50 years of threats
Yeah.
in Republican administrations to funding for public media, this is by far the most serious. And the Senate might not be the end of it. Say we're able to beat that package back in the Senate. You know, I have heard the administration's budget director on CNN and in other fora, and there's a story in the New York Times today talking about just impounding the money. And would they just impound the money, which would end up in court, I'm sure, like so many things have, but that could all take a while to
So
work
we have
out.
to be vigilant for 3.5 years is the bottom line.
Yeah.
At least.
Susan Goldberg, keep doing it, and thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you
both.
very much
Thanks
for
so
coming
much.
in. Susan Goldberg is president and CEO of GBH. We thank her very, very much.